Good afternoon. Welcome everyone. Earlier this afternoon I said to someone I'm going to interview Marek Sindelka, and that person said, "Oh, you're going to interview the young god of Czech literature." So here he is.
Well,
welcome.
Thank you.
Marek Sindelka, who is a Czech writer and poet. He made his debut with a poetry collection a few years ago, followed by some short story collections, and then more recently a book translated in Dutch called Mapping Anna. I think you can translate it like that in English, or
The Map of Anna. The Czech title was
the
Map of Anna.
Yeah, and there's a new book out, which is not translated yet, but it appeared last year, I think, or a few months ago.
Yeah, it was published in December.
And it's called Material Fatigue. So, welcome, Marek, to Brussels.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You seem to be a poet who writes short stories, and a short story writer who has written a novel, or some kind of novel. Let's talk a little bit about The Map of Anna, the book that you've written, and try to describe a little bit perhaps what sort of a book it is, and what kind of book you think it is.
Yeah, well, I think it's something in between. When I decided to create something new, it's not a compilation of short stories. It's not a novel. I think it's a puzzle. In fact, something like I like the idea of something like children puzzle, when you have to connect some points and then a shape occurs, and
connecting the dots.
Yeah, connecting the dots, and that's exactly what is happening in the book. It's about Anna, who is completely invisible in the stories or in the story, and it's I was somehow fascinated with idea to create a character who is more like a shadow or just a shape than a human being. And in the end, in the very last chapter of the book, the Anna finally appears, and then she somehow becomes active and prepare for life, because it's also about some infection in our lives, how people deal with things which they inherited from their parents, for example, from their partners, and how these small parasites are affecting their lives, and that's it. And in the end, she gets rid of these burdens and or infections, and finally she somehow finds a peace in her life.
Yeah. Let's talk first a little bit more about the form and in which it appears. It's a very peculiar reading experience, because I was thinking, oh, I'm reading a short story collection, and suddenly there's an epiphany almost, that everything is connected. Is that something you deliberately placed in the book? And was it conceptually from the beginning that you deliberately thought a bit about it like this, or is it more organically grown, that you had stories that you thought, well, they could be connected?
Well, I think I always work in an, let's say, organic way. In the beginning I always am looking for something vivid in the text, something like a lodge of some energy, or it's like when you are going underground on the surface of the text. It's like a mine when you're in which you are searching some energy, something vivid, and it could be a character, it could be an atmosphere, it could be just a gesture of a character, and then you let it grow somehow. And
could it be a word as well, like crystal, for example?
Exactly. Yeah. So I developed somehow a structure which is more like a web, or let's say, or a crystal form than a typical like literary form. It's I wanted to somehow unpicked reality in the book, somehow some feelings and atmospheres and thoughts and values of my generation, and I thought that a literary web would be the perfect form for it, because you know we are online, we are connected in webs, and that's it. That was the first idea.
It's reflected in the shape, the drawing that is on the cover of the book, also in the Czech version. There's something, and it's not really clear what it is, but it shows that it has many angles and many surfaces.
Exactly, many facets. Many. It's like a cubistic form, and the main character Anna is also. It's like a cubistic portrait of the character. You can observe her from many points of view, and it's up to you, it's up to reader to create or recreate your own image of the character, and that's what thrills me, because I like the idea that the reader is also part of the creative process, because you have to always count on your readers, because they're the owner of the fiction and the fictive world, and they have to recreate it according to your let's say prescription. But it's the book itself is something dead completely. That's not a living form. It's a text on paper, nothing more. You have to somehow connect it to an imagination, to a thinking brain, which somehow inspire it with life.
So without the reader, there's no book. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no literature without readers. That's simple. Yeah. I never believed writers who said that I don't care about my readers. It's nonsense, absolutely.
It's a sort of a collaboration, it seems, between the mind of the writer and the mind of the reader, and in the middle somewhere something grows. Yeah, that's very beautiful. What I in your book, I was as a reader very often enticed to use my imagination, because you use short sentences, depict a typical sphere somewhere, and then I'm allowed sort of to fill the image in. I suppose that's also the deliberate choice that you've made.
Exactly, and always there is an important thing. What is going on in gaps when you have this is a collection of stories or a very experimental novel, let's say. It's very fragmental, and you have many gaps between the stories, between the chapters, and you have to somehow fulfill it with your imagination. And that's what interested me. I think it originates in poetry, because my first book was a compilation of poems, and I realized when I published the book, or when the book came out, I was so afraid and anxious about how I was sure nobody was going to understand it, because it was too personal, too intimate, very fragile memories of my childhood, and I was surprised how many people how many people were able to found themselves in the book. And then I realized that there must be a connection, that there must be a cooperation between a writer and a reader, and you always fill it with your own thoughts, your memories, your senses. All your senses are involved in the process. And
and there's also, you mentioned the word puzzle in the beginning. There's an element of playfulness in the whole collection, the whole novel, the whole experiment.
Right.
Also, I think in terms of your sensitivity to language, a sentence like, I'm not quoting it perfectly, I think, but something like there's a character seeing a Formula One race on television, and there's like Formula One sound like migraine or something like that. It's full of these beautiful little diamonds of language. So that's the poet being in the novelist somehow, I suppose.
Yeah, I of course I'm sometimes I'm afraid I sometimes overload the text with images, and especially in this book, it was my aim to create a sort of to literally overload the book with images, with some attractions, because it's the book about nowadays life, and I think it's and under the surface of this, let's say, attractive firework, there is a big black emptiness of reality of the real life of the characters. All of them are facing the emptiness of life somehow, or the boredom, the unbearable boredom of luxury life of Western civilization. Yeah. They're not, in fact, unhappy, but they're in a very special state of. All of them are standing on the crossroad, and they're unable to choose a way or an aim in their lives, and that's what frustrates them. And it's a book about my generation.
Exactly. I have some questions about that, but before we go to that, about the language, I wanted to ask you another question about that, and that is how important is the sound to you of particular words? I mean, I can imagine the imagery and the sound. It seems like important to know, because as a poet, of course, I imagine you are sensitive to that part as well. But of course, in translation, we maybe lose a couple of things. One of the things that I noticed that probably we're losing is, if you don't know Czech reality, at a certain point they eat rakvičky, so little coffins, and there's so the cookie, which is called a coffin, is typically a Czech element, of course. But maybe there are more things that we don't, as a foreign reader, don't get when we that you place attention to. Is that the case?
As for rakvičky se šlehačkou, which is the very special dessert in Czech Republic, I was asked when I was invited to Ghent last time I was here. It was like a month ago. I was asked by one reader to bring some rakvičky se šlehačkou, please, and a bottle of Becherovka. I love it,
but of course, omnium is that they're called little coffins. They look like
little coffins,
little cookies.
I hate them completely. It's so sweet but as for the sound of words, it's very important, and because. And it's also a lecture or a lesson gained from poetry, because the words are, or the sound of words could be also a very important quality. It used to be, in ancient times, the words were almost magical formulas, it captures a part of the world. Some words used for example, hiss and noises and things like that. It contain these qualities. When you said hiss in English, you can hear it in the word, and I'm really amused by these qualities, these little qualities in text and the words, and of course it probably has to be your mother tongue, and you have to go very deep inside the language and observe the very core of it somehow, and that's a big fascination, I think, for everybody who is a writer. It always occurs that you realize that language is almost a ritual or a magical act, because it used to be it used to be forbidden to use some words like in usual cases they were sacral words, and it's a way how we in fact actually how we shape this world. It's the main ability of mankind to use language to somehow shape the world, to conquer it, to rule it, and with all the consequences.
And sometimes it escapes our attempts to control and to rule it through language as well, which then also becomes interesting.
So, and there's a fact inevitable: when you don't know any language, you are not a human. You are not a human being, because we have these cases of what's the expression? Wolf children who were carried out or brought up by animals, by wolves, like Victor from Averon or other children, or Mowgli, for example. But that's fictional character. Victor from Averon was real, and they weren't able to. They never become human beings because of the lack of language, of the structures, of the concepts. So
it shapes your brain when you learn to speak and so on, and it changes. You are your environment in a certain way as well by that process. Let's talk about this emptiness that you somehow diagnose in your generation. I don't know if it's only a thing of your generation, of our times. Let's put it that way, perhaps. So it's striking in the book that there are quite a lot of sad loves in it. So there's love in it, but it always has an edge of the inability to reach some sort of unspoken ideal.
I think it has to do something with the concept of family in these days, because it is completely distorted somehow, corrupt, because family is no longer needed somehow. We can survive as individuals, and that's a sad fact. But we still have children. We still have to bring them up, and for children it's always stressor, or it's full of stress to not have their family complete, and that's one of the things which I want to look into in the book, because the majority of my friends are from divorced families, and it's something typical. I think we grow up in a world of individuals, and it shapes our own life, and that's well, in the book it's not depressive fact. The characters are not like depressed by the fact. They're just lost a little bit,
lost
or more.
Lost is, I think, somehow the feeling that I had as a reader, that these characters were, in a way that, I mean, in this fantastic story, The Shell, where the two people who are forming a couple, one is they both want to get away from each other, but somehow they remain together for different reasons because they think it's the best for the other, and so on. So a misunderstanding somehow.
That's typical case in the book, that people are longing for each other, but on the other hand they hate themselves, or they're longing for people, and on the other hand they are scared of them. They're frightened of people and of social contact. So it's something. There is tension in what people want really. Also, I think it's about all of these opportunities we have in our life, because this world, this Western civilization offers you so many ways, so many life strategies and life so you are constantly forced to make choices, and for many people it's frustrated in a way, because people always want to have the world black and white, as black and white as possible. And when you have to deal on your own, when you have to deal with the reality on your own, and all the consequences are up to you, or it's something. It could be very stressful, I think.
And do you think that this paradox of wishing and wanting and too much choice, that this is typical for our times, or is it? Would it not be so present in the past?
Certainly it was, but now it is, I think, just more visible, and it's a bigger problem, I think, because we live longer, we don't have to, we have plenty of time. That's something which is completely new. People didn't have time for all these thoughts, and they didn't have time for Facebook and I don't know, in like 100 or 200 years ago. There was aristocracy, which of course had plenty of time and things like that, but the majority of people, and they don't have Facebook, of course, but the majority of people was working all the time, and was somehow connected to natural cycles of growth and something like that. I think we are dealing with completely new situation, which contain or encompass the social media, the luxury of our lives. Like we in fact, we are living in an incubator in the Western civilization. We have our images of world, we have our media, but they are designed for a special purpose, to entertain us. It's not a mirror of the world. It's just infotainment, as it is called, and we have to somehow survive in that environment, which is very comfortable. But I think when our brain is bored, it always develop a problem to deal with. So it's very easy.
Even if you don't have a problem, it will create one for you. Yeah. So and coming now to your brain, this brings us, and in fact, to the another element which is very present in your book that we haven't talked about yet, and that's the bodily experience. So mapping a character is done through the mapping of the body of the character somehow, and the body plays a big role in all these stories.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why have you chosen this particular entrance into these stories?
Well, I think that's very it's the I think main topic of all my books, is the body and the embodiment of contemporary human being. The fact that we somehow split ourselves into body and mind, and which was probably done by Catholic Church, or I don't know who exactly did it, but our philosophers and other people, and we somehow have to deal or think in this distinction, if we like it or not, and
it's hard to escape.
It, and somehow our body is a little problem in this world, because it's desperately out of date for nowadays life, because we were designed for fight for survive in very severe circumstances, and now we have central heating and Facebook. That's something which we weren't prepared for, and
so you say our body is not equipped to deal with that particular type of reality.
Yeah, our genome is 200 of thousands years old now. We are same as we were 200 of thousands ago and of years ago, and that's something which I was interested in the book which was published before the Map of Anna, and it was about some archetypes in human beings still working inside human beings, and in Anna it is more about the body as a problem, as a let's say some discomfort that these characters feel with their own body or inside their own bodies, like if they were inhabitants of some matter, or what the inhabitants of their own bodies, and they have to facing the fact that their body is growing old or aging, and that they're mortal. Just that fact is very stressed this character, that they're mortal, and how to deal with that fact, because on social networks, your image is immortal, of course, and on advertisement you can see people who are immortal. That's never-ending tale of young and healthy, happy people, and that's, of course, it could be very stressful, like deal with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I maybe suggest that you read a part of the Map of Anna, which actually illustrates some of the things that you've said now. The beginning, the opening pages of the book.
Fine. I'll try it in English. So, and this is a story about stage fright, which is state I realized that it's like a crossroads of our of body and mind somehow, or our social parts and our almost like animal parts of our beings, because you during that state you have to deal with your pulse, with your breath, with your that you're sweating, that you're anxious, that you have to somehow fight your own body, literally, because the body has this escape movements, like, or defense movements, like it tries to force you to. It is moving into the fetal position, and you have to fight with it to not doing it, and I like the idea that in that very state, when you want to show people what have you done, how good you are in literature, or what, and that your body somehow don't obey, so that's the story on that. And title is Showtime. It begins with the body, racing heart, sweaty palms, dry mouth. I'm sitting on silk, suit, tiny prickly hairs. In this chair-like thing, stomach larching. Some dressing room or makeup room, big mirror. You've seen the type, light bulbs or around it. I made it up. There are no light bulbs, thank God. I can't stand light. I'm sitting in near total darkness, squirming in a suit so new it stinks, in starched fabrics in my own skin scrubbed red, hair reeking of shampoo, nails neatly trimmed and peeled clean of the ring of flesh constantly growing in around them. Why does the body have to keep growing all the time? There's always something to take care of. It's enough to drive you crazy. Always something to feed, put to sleep, bath, groom, for Christ's sake. The body's like a little kid. Needy and dependent. It's awful. 3 minutes, 25 seconds, here it comes. The theme song starts to play, the audience applauds, makes me sick. Ever had stage fright? They say it helps to breathe deeply. I breathe deeply, but so much blood goes to my brain I almost pass out. These slight black and white dots flicker before my eyes, this grainy pattern like snow, you know, on old TVs. That pattern that used to come on the end of the night. Same thing, like your body's tuned the wrong channel. Must be a nerve thing, some bad circuitry. You can smell it in your nose, the crackle, this sort of electrical smell, sparks in my brain. My lower lip tingles, then the whole left half of my face. It goes shooting down on my hands and all the way to the tips of my fingers. My fingerprints are starting to get a phosphorescent glow. Can you smell it too? Do you know what I mean? Now the nose, just to make sure, says the makeup artist, materializing from out of the dots. She turns on the light, the tinkle of liquid lights in a tube along the ceiling. She starts powdering my face. Can you smell that too? My head is tingling. What? She doesn't have a clue. The electricity, I say. My tongue is tingling. I can talk. But she's long gone. The teeth in my mouth are meticulously brushed. I run my tongue over them, touch the inside of my cheeks. Does your tongue count as an innard? No? How is anyone supposed to keep track of this stuff? It's all dry. 3 minutes. They applaud. Where were we? Tongues. You know what a tongue is? The part of your innards you use to make words. How disgusting is that? If you know what I mean, words. Why do words originate in flesh? The movement of a muscle. 2 minutes, 50 seconds. Ever had stage fright? They say it helps to think of something nice, but I can feel my innards moving inside me, especially my heart, like it's having intercourse with some other organ. There's nothing nice about a heartbeat. Don't kid yourself. And there's no way to stop it. 2 minutes, 22 seconds. This is the end. It's actually pretty humiliating having stage fright, like being found guilty of having a body. You know, like being caught doing something bad, caught in the awkward act of inhabiting a body. Come out with your hands up. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Nice sounding sentence. Maybe you explain who taught us that, who took away our comfort of inhabiting of the material world. What I wouldn't give to be able to launch around my body like a living room. 100 billion years ago, God came into existence, then he created the world, etc. It's all scientifically proven, but as for who invented the soul, that remains a mystery. Notice how the word soul originates in flesh, in the movement of a muscle. Ever had a stage fright? 1 minute, 58 seconds.
Thank you. Very beautiful.
Thank you for being patient with my English.
Let's talk about a more recent book. Material Fatigue. It's not translated yet in Dutch, but it's out in the Czech version. What was your inspiration there? It has a particular inspiration, right?
Well, yes, exactly. In the beginning, there was that car found on a highway somewhere in Austria, and I was somehow shocked by that event, and especially by discussion which occurs in Czech news, or like discussion of people under articles which were so shameful, and I was angry about let's say my nation. So I decided to write a book which completely which almost makes people vomiting, for example. I decided to write a book which would be whole about the state of not having enough oxygen, and I planned to do it, or I was going to do it on let's say 150 pages, just second by second, and I started with that, but I realized that it's impossible. It was too much and too far-fetched, and it won't work. That was the first idea, and after that I decided to write a book about the car, about the van in which the people were found, and it was also very focused on processes and manufacturing and machines on move somehow, because the first chapter was, or I was going to write the first chapter in car factory, or in an assembly line where the car was manufactured, and then the second chapter would be about the car used for distributing meat from slaughterhouses to shops, and next chapter I planned to make up it about when the car was sold and it was used to somehow distribute material all around Europe, and then someone put 70 people in it, and they after 20 minutes they all suffocated, and the car in the end was found on the highway. But that was the
plan, but
that was the plan.
It turned out to be a bit of a different book in the end. So.
In the end, I realized that it was so full of material and processes and things like that. It was so plain as some flyer for microwave oven or something like that, or it was totally it was impossible to write and to read that text, and I decided to put some characters in it.
Right.
And
that's the book now.
That's the book now.
You did some research. I mean, it's a fiction book, but you did some research to go in, and the event on which it's inspired is something that really happened. But can you tell us something about what kind of research you did and that fled into the story of the book?
Yeah. Well, I was in touch with several people from Syria and Afghanistan, but
in the Czech Republic?
Yes, in the Czech Republic. Some of them weren't people from the contemporary migrant wave, or they came before, and so I and they recommended me some other people, and the Facebook was very useful for that, because many people during the journey share their advices and information about where to go, where not to go. For example, there is an information not ever go to Czech Republic because they will hate you. So I was somehow surprised how it works, and you can. But in certain point, I felt somehow ashamed by my own investigation, because it's something strange when you realize that you are talking to people and you are longing for the worst what they ever experienced, and it's like, well, look, I'm a writer, I want a new book, and so tell me all the details you have and I will use it for my novel. So I decided to somehow just use the framework and not mention any documentary material, because in the first place they are people, they are human beings. After that, they are refugees, Muslims, and other things, and that's what is the book about. I hope it's universal. It's about two brothers who were separated by people smugglers who came to Europe, and the younger one is trying to find his way to his older brother, and it's about mostly about how he observed the Europe and how the Europe observes him. It's about this mutual observation.
Yeah, and representation as well.
Representation and fears, and then the barriers which stand in that, which somehow blur this observation. And it's very simple story because it is set in a unknown, or it isn't mentioned where exactly it is set. It's a country in the middle of Europe somewhere, where he, in the very first sentence of book, he throw his back over a fence and then he jump in the snow, and from this moment on he's just going or running, and he just go or run, and because he used to be a runner in his home country, and it's very simple because it is winter time, it is snowing, temperatures are very low, and he just has to find a place where to sleep, what to eat. He's trying to find a cell phone, which is very important for him to contact his brother, but he's not able to get any, or at least a map. And he's also trying to find a way to a city, because he's not so visible there. He can hide in a crowd and things like that. So it's a fiction, and I think in general it's something very universal. A universal state of isolation. In the book isn't mentioned also from country he escaped, and
that doesn't matter so much.
That doesn't matter.
It's about
Exactly.
the universal experience, and more that it seems.
And my main aim was to somehow also unpick the state that your body is also again a problem, like in previous book, but here in a very different meaning. It's a problem because you have to somehow transport it from a continent to continent. You
the body is policed as well from the outside,
exactly,
much more than in
So you have to somehow. You have to give your fingerprints, and you're somehow there are prejudices just because of your physiognomy and your color of your skin, and simply these things. And I tried to focus on situations like when they're trying to come to Europe, they use not a very typical way. They are like put inside a car, but in small gaps created in the engine of the car, for example, or in car seats where they are camouflaged in the seats, and another person is then sitting on their lap, and it's not so a common way how to get into Europe, but for me it was a metaphor of the situation. Somehow you have to shape your own body according to a system, and your soul also you have to deal with anxiety because you're in a very the conditions are terrible, because you have a space or room like you have to be in a fetal position again, and you have to deal with your fears, and then these people are very often poisoned by gas by gasoline. And things like that.
Yeah, so it seems that in this case of this book, it's also in a way about the body, but in a way more like it's how the body is connected to world politics. It's a big world politics happening, but it's reflected in personal, intimate bodily experiences.
And who exactly possesses the body, your body, and how body always was and is a political instrument, because you have in every society you have to deal with some function, how body functions, and so like Michel Foucault described in his books. It's about biopolitics, how the society
is governed by society,
and ruled, and how small movements are ruled and used. For example, you can see it in army, in every organized forces of states.
So this book has come out a few months ago. What have been the responses in the Czech Republic? Has it been read as a social commentary, or rather as a pleasant or unpleasant novel to read, or?
Yeah, I always receive very mixed up reviews. All of my books were a part of critics hate them completely, part of them love them, and sometimes this is a special book.
What I mean, my question is it possible to, or I imagine that people read it against the background of current events and about the background of the political discussion about refugees and migration and so on.
I think it's in Czech Republic we have a very special situation, because we don't have any migrants, and people in spite that fact, are ready for the end of the world and
ready to go to war with the migrants.
And they're prepared for everything. And so the book, I was aware that the reception will be very, very passionate, and
it is like that.
Yeah, and it is. Yeah. So, and I also felt that it is very important for artists to talk about the subject, because otherwise, I'm afraid we are heading to a very closed society, very society ruled by fear and virtual problems, because that problem is in fact virtual in Czech Republic. That's not there is no problem with migrants, because we don't have any, and so but we can
passions can be
exactly we can somehow thrill ourselves by the fears and that's a sad situation, and but for example in Hungary the situation is even worse. It's a couple of weeks ago I discussed it with my Hungarian translator, and she told me that things that I was, but you know it probably, how they deal with the situation and use it in politics as a campaign by Orbán. It's not about the Jobbik anymore. The Jobbik is almost that's just almost like freaks. But really, what is really scary is Orbán's regime,
how it influences the extreme thought, how it influences mainstream of so-called mainstream politics.
And but I have many friends from I know many Arabic friends, so I was angry about how and again that's about some black and white world. We are all that's the main topic or main how Dostoevsky has a great bon mot on that the human being is that our unfortunate being who is born with the gift of freedom, and the whole life his struggle for get rid of it somehow because it's so stressful and so heavy burden to care. So I think that's it. That's exactly it. And
so that's the underlying sort of things that you've been thinking about when writing. Writing as well. Yeah.
Exactly, and it was like a feverish state when I was writing the book, because I felt strong anger and mixed with feeling of shame, and when I finished the book, I've got like 40 degrees temperature, and I have to.
You literally had a fever,
and I was completely exhausted, material fatigue, and so I had to spend 10 days in bed, and I was. It was like really like give a birth.
It's interesting that it's interesting how you talk about this, because again, I mean, this bodily experience it goes to yourself as a writer. You experience the topic while writing about it. All right.
I always feel it, because the book is. It isn't a pleasant experience, I think, reading the book, because it's I really designed it as something very which is very active in a way that it longs for your sensitivity, and it longs for cooperation and to somehow. I think that's what literature is capable of, to somehow force you to be there, to be in the situation, to experience it really, really like on the very, very. It could be almost unbearable to be there. And then I try to compose the book sometimes in in several parts of it, like almost on the edge of what is bearable.
Yeah, but again, it asks for the reader to participate in this process.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and that connects these two books very well together. Obviously, there's much more to say about your magnificent work, about the topics that have inspired you, but we have to conclude now. Marek Sindelka will be signing later on, well, actually now, in 5 minutes or something, if you're still ready for it, at Beurschouwburg, a little further down in the street. Thank you, Marek Sindelka, for this wonderful conversation, for your beautiful reading, and thank you all for
thank you for coming,
being here and being with this conversation. Thank you.